Call the James City County Wetlands Board to order. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to preserve the wetlands and to accommodate economic activities so as to prevent their despoliation. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. Lukers?
Here.
Mr. Gussman?
Here.
Mr. Hughes?
Here.
And Mr. Afferson?
Here.
Have you all had a chance to look at the minutes? Any corrections, additions, deletions? Okay, the minutes stand as prepared. We have a public hearing. The first one is WJP 190001, and I think Mr. Long is going to do. Hi, Mr. Long. You put a little bit of time on there.
Before Mr. Long gives the presentation, I do want to make one staff announcement to the board and to the public. I'd like to introduce the new Stormwater and Resource Protection Division Director, Ms. Tony Small.
Hello.
Welcome, Tony.
And with that, I'll let Mr. Long.
Thank you.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present WJPA-19-0001 for property 704 Arlington Island Road. Mr. Daniel Winnall of Water's Edge Construction has applied for a wetlands permit on behalf of Mr. Kenneth Latimer to protect the shoreline of his property by installing a riprap revetment wall on property located at 704 Arlington Island Road within the Diaskin Creek watershed. A replacement pier is also being installed associated with the scope of work, and there is no proposed removal of vegetated wetlands during the construction of this project. However, vegetation will be pruned to accommodate for this project. The proposed shoreline stabilization method is to mitigate, the purpose of it is to mitigate wave action as a result of passing boats in the creek. And currently the bank is seeing erosion and beginning to slough landwards back towards Mr. Latimer's property. During the month of January, staff made a visit and determined that there is a potential to damage wetland vegetation during the scope of work. For this reason, and due to the unknown quantity of wetland impacts that may occur, staff does suggest a surety in the amount of $500 be required to guarantee the no net loss wetland policy as outlined in 4 VAC 20-390-10, and shall be in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office. The applicant has proposed the replanting of any vegetation that may be lost during the scope of the proposed project as well. Once the project is completed, staff will make a determination if any vegetated wetland area has been lost and therefore must be mitigated. In order for proposed project to be authorized to impact wetlands and compensate for the wetland loss in some prescribed manner, the following 3 criteria must be met. That all reasonable mitigative efforts, including alternative siting, which would eliminate or minimize wetland loss or disturbance, must be incorporated in the proposal. That the proposal must clearly be water dependent in nature, and the proposals must demonstrate clearly its need to be in the wetlands and its overwhelming public and private benefits. If the proposed project cannot meet one or more of the above criteria, the project must be denied or must occur in areas outside of the wetlands. Should it satisfy all 3 of these criteria, however, compensation for the wetland loss is required. Staff has reviewed this application against the mitigation policy and finds that this project does meet all 3 criteria outlined in the policy, and any proposed plantings will compensate for the loss of any vegetated tidal wetlands. Staff recommends approval of this application, and should the board wish to approve the application, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. That the applicant obtain all other necessary local, state, and/or federal permits required for the project. A surety in the amount of $500 shall guarantee the no net loss wetland policy as outlined in 4 VAC 20-390-10, and this surety shall be made into a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office. That all development activities located in the special flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 Floodplain Area Regulations of the James City County Zoning Ordinance and receive all required approvals and permits prior to the commencement of such activities. The wetlands permit for this project shall expire on March 13th, 2020 if construction has not begun, and an extension of the permit written and requested submitted no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. At this time, I'll now divert your attention to the screen for a short presentation. Again, this is WJPA-19-0001 for Mr. Kenneth Latimer, and the purpose is to install a riprap revetment on the bank of his property. A vicinity map showing the owner's property here at 704 Arlington Island Road in the Diaskin Creek watershed. Aerial photography showing the current pier to be replaced and also the owner's bank that is proposed for revetment. Topography shows a steep slope coming from upland down into the water, which is where the erosion is occurring and why we're seeing the need for a revetment at this property. Floodplain as it affects this property and the scope of work here. Floodplain does encompass what appears to be all of the scope of work. Oops. Site plan here indicating what the applicant is proposing to do. Applicant has shown mean low water and mean high water as it affects this property here and here, and the proposed revetment along the bank of Mr. Latimer's property. Some site photos of the bank. As you can see, there are sensitive wetland vegetation along the bank. The bank is approximately where my cursor is floating right now. We've got bald cypress here and plants growing along this bank. A view from the other side of the bank, looking in the opposite direction, you can make out some of the riprap that has previously been there, and some more here as well. However, it's very sparse and certainly not doing its job at the moment. Again, more riprap at the very, very base of the slope. However, it seems to be many, many years ago, and we are seeing a decent amount of erosion sloughing in towards the water. Again, staff does recommend approval of this application request under the conditions that all other necessary federal, state, and local permits be obtained as required, that a surety in the amount of $500 be made out to the James City County's Attorney's Office, and that all development in the floodplain special hazard area be compliant with Article 6, Division 3 of the Floodplain Area Regulations, and that this wetlands permit shall become null and void if not constructed by March 13th, 2020, and with a written request for extension no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration date at January 31st, 2020. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time, and thank you.
Good. The bank, is it cut out? Does the bank will have to be straightened, or are the stones going to go underneath of the where it's washed out?
I will defer that question to the applicant.
And how far out is the riprap going to go from the bank when it goes in?
I also will allow the applicant to answer that.
And the bald cypress, will that remain?
Yes, yes it will.
Do you have any other questions? Thank you, sir. We'll open the public hearing if the applicant or the public would like to speak.
Good afternoon. I'm Danny Winall. I'm the agent for the project and also the contractor on the job. To answer your questions, the toe of the riprap will be above mean low water, which is, well, you can see it on the plans. It's off the toe of the bank. Probably the mean low water is probably, it depends up and down the shoreline, but probably 3 or 4 feet on the shelf below the toe of the bank. So we plan on staying above that. We're going to follow the natural contour of the shoreline as best we can. So we're not planning on doing any major bank grading whatsoever. Just kind of, he wants, Mr. Latimer wants to keep it as natural as possible.
Does he know of the recommendation of the staff? Is there any problem with the recommendation of the staff as far as your applicant?
The surety?
Yes, and
Yes, we talked about that.
so everything's acceptable as far as you know. Other questions?
I'm just curious, are you aware of any recent history of the high water, high water marks from flooding or flood conditions?
Well, the pier that's there now is low. It was built many years ago, so it floods on a regular basis. So we plan on raising elevation of the pier about 2 feet. And the top of the proposed revetment is only at +5 because the upper part of the bank is fairly stable, so there's no reason to armor all the way to the top. You don't get any wave fetch there. You just get occasional waves, big waves from boats, but they're gone. There's only 3 or 4 waves and then they're gone. It's not like a continual storm event pounding on the bank.
So it's likely the revetment would be topped in flood conditions, but
It will be, yeah.
No,
Because we're
no real
proposing
wave action at
+5,
that
so
point.
that's just a normal northeaster.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, sir. We'll close the public hearing and go for discussion. Any issue? Anybody like to make a motion?
I would, sir. I'd like to make a motion that we vote to approve the application of WJPA 19-001.
Okay, we've got a motion to adopt a resolution. Any questions? Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Lukens?
Yes,
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
You have your permit. Do we have anything for board consideration? Yes.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for the quality of the work that I've seen your company do in the last 10 years. Most of the time when you're not there, I like to come and take a look at it just to what's going on. And I fully support the quality of the work that you do and your reputation. The bricks that are in the slides that were here by the county, they were probably put there in the 40s. It looks to me like they were the bricks from the old brickyard landing. And if you look, you can see that that type of brick came from the landing, and it was at least the 1940s when the bricks were given away for folks that wanted to try to stop erosion. That's where they came from. So that doesn't mean anything except that I do want to compliment you publicly for the quality of work that you do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
It means you've been around a long time.
A whole lot longer than that. Yes, indeed. Sir? I remember those bricks. I remember when the brickyard was in operation there, and the folks look at this and they wonder, how in the world those big holes get dug in the bank back there? What happened there? And that's where the clay came from to make the bricks that were shipped off off the land in there. Enough said. I'm taking too much time.
Okay. Do we have anything else for board consideration? Do we have any matters of special privilege? Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we are adjourned.
I'd like to call to order the Chesapeake Bay Board meeting of March 13th, 2019. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rodley?
Here.
Mr. Lukens?
here.
Mr. Gussman?
Here.
Mr. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Apperson?
Here.
Next order of business are the minutes from the December 12th meeting. Are there any problems with the minutes?
No, sir.
Minutes stand approved. I'll move on to our public hearings. Our first public hearing is CBPA 19-0010 at 9003 Diaskin Road.
Evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mike Wilson, Senior Watershed Planner, here to present case CBPA 19-0010. Mr. Wayne Savage of the Bay Design Group has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Charles and Diane Hasbrook for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of septic fields on property located at 9003 Diaskin Road within the Diaskin Creek watershed. Property is further identified as James City County tax map parcel 09201 00001. Total size of this property is 97.5 acres, of which 46% is located within the RPA. Septic system drain fields are associated with the Hasbrook Equine Center, which is proposed to be constructed on this property and is currently under review by county staff. The entirety of the project is proposed to be constructed outside of the RPA, with the exception of the primary and reserve septic fields, which are proposed within the landward 50-foot RPA. Total land area of disturbance associated with the primary and reserve septic fields equates to approximately 1,439 square feet. Location of the scope of work has been proposed due to the variable soils that limit the available space in which to put a drain field. The project is proposed in emporia soils, which are suitable for the construction of drain fields. However, the soils found outside of the RPA are characterized as craven uchi, a severe wet soil that percolates very slowly. Although no mitigation has been proposed by the applicant at this time, the applicant has worked with the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District to prepare a formal agricultural conservation plan for the entire parcel, which will incorporate agricultural best management practices. Staff's evaluated the application and the exception request for the construction of septic systems and septic drain fields, finds that the application does meet the conditions in sections 2311 and 2314, and the application should be heard before the board because the situation is self-created and in staff's opinion, sufficient room outside of the RPA in which to locate the drain fields. Therefore, the request must be considered by the board following a public hearing under the formal exception process. Exception granting body is permitted to require reasonable and appropriate conditions in granting the exception request in accordance with section 2314. The Chesapeake Bay Board should fully consider this exception request as outlined and presented, and along with the WQIA, the board may grant the exception with such conditions and safeguards as deemed necessary to further the purpose and intent of the county's Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. Staff has reviewed this application and the exception request and has determined the impacts for this proposal to be moderate for the proposed development. Staff does recommend denial of this exception request because this situation is self-created. However, should the board wish to approve the plan and this exception request, staff does request the following conditions be incorporated into that approval. That the applicant obtain any other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. That the applicant shall restore the seaward 50-foot RPA in the vicinity of the drain fields, approximately 550 feet in length, with the standard mitigation rate of 1 planting unit per 400 square feet, which does equate to 1 canopy tree, 2 understory tree, and 3 shrubs, or approximately 48 planting units. That a surety of $5,000 in the form of acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office be provided to ensure that the mitigation plantings. That this exception request become null and void if construction is not begun by March 13, 2020. And that any written request for extension to this exception request be submitted to the Stormwater Resource Protection Division no later than January 31st, 2020. If I may turn your attention to the screen, we do have a short presentation. Again, this is CBPA 19-0010, 9003 Daskin Road. And their request is to install primary and reserve septic system drain fields within the RPA. Subject parcel, again, the size of this parcel is approximately 97.5 acres. Project location, this is a 2013 aerial photograph. This area has been logged. It was logged prior to the Hasbrooks purchasing the property. I want to make sure we're clear on that. 2017 photograph showing the project location. Topography of the site, the equine center is going to be up in this general area here. That includes a riding arena and stalls. And then this area back here would be pasture for the horses. And there's other pasture areas on the property that aren't pointed out specifically in this presentation. Soil survey from the Williamsburg-James City County Soil Survey. There's 4 different soils that affect this portion of the property. The 2 most important are the Emporia soils, shaded in orange, and then the Craven-Uchi soils immediately above them in a purplish color. The Johnston soil complex is it's always associated with wetlands and floodplain, and those aren't suitable at all for any kind of septic systems. Then the RPA as it affects the property. From the site plan application, the indoor riding arena, stalls, a little bit of parking, and then the septic system coming down here, and then the septic fields primary and reserve in this location. A couple of photographs from the site. And do want to point out this green roofed building here. Specifically, I'm going to go back to the aerial photograph and show you where that is. That's this building here. And a couple other photographs. Mitigation proposal put forth by staff. This is the approximate area of the seaward 50-foot RPA restoration. According to the Colonial Soil and Water District Conservation Plan that has been approved by their district board, they've approved a 50-foot encroachment into the RPA for that agricultural plan because they're doing nutrient management and some other agricultural BMPs. Along with that, if the board should decide to approve this application, that's the seaward 50-foot approximately that has been impacted by previous land use decisions that staff would like to see restored. So the permit conditions, should the board approve this application, that they obtain any other necessary local, federal, state permits, that the applicant restore the seaward 50-foot RPA in the vicinity of the drain fields. It includes approximately 48 planting units. The exact amount would be determined at a later time. A surety of $5,000 to ensure the mitigation plantings, that the exception request become null and void if construction has not begun by March 13, 2020, and that if they need a written request for an extension, it be submitted no later than January 31st of 2020. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have regarding this application.
This seems to me to be one of the first cases where the property's been acted upon by the Soil and Water Conservation District have approved a reduction in the RPA, and then we're also acting on it.
That is correct, Mr. Gussman. The Soil and Water Conservation District does have a role to play in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. However, the board's role in this particular case would supersede their action. If agriculture is allowed a 50-foot encroachment into the buffer assuming they have an agricultural plan developed by the Soil and Water District, which I did recommend to the Hasbrooks that they undertake, and they did so. That can actually be reduced down to 25 foot and encroach 25 feet into the seaward RPA, but then they'd have to provide even more agricultural BMPs. The Soil and Water District are the experts in those types of water quality BMPs. To my knowledge, they have not ever approved a further reduction besides into the 50-foot landward RPA.
This is the first time this is coming up with us. The approved plan, do you have any idea what it says, or what are the elements of it, and how is it is it enforceable, or is it strictly a voluntary plan?
I did read it. I did not make a bullet list of their recommendations other than manure management, composting, rotational grazing of the pastures. There's a recommendation on types of grasses as well. I lost my train of thought.
Is it if it's approved?
Yes.
Do they have to Do they
Yes.
have to honor the plan, or is it strictly a voluntary deal?
From the Soil and Water District's perspective, they do not do enforcement, the county does. So it is enforceable by staff.
So if like the manure provisions we were getting complaints about water quality issues due to the manure, and it wasn't in compliance with the plan, the county could enforce the soil and water conservation plan?
Yes, we've not done that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure exactly what the process or the length of time of that would be, but that's the way it is laid out.
One question with regard to that, in the recommendations, if in the approval process, could those also reference the soil and water plan, saying we're assuming that the requirements, basically the conditions set forth by soil and water, will be addressed as part of the recommendation from this board?
Yeah, we certainly could do that.
I mean,
or you could do that. If that's the way you're leaning towards.
Ties them together. I don't know much about the process at this
Yeah,
point.
if that's the way the board is leaning towards, then you would make a motion to modify the resolution to include the recommendations of the approved Soil and Water District agricultural plan.
One other question, which may relate to that, is the mitigation that you listed in your recommendation. Is that in addition to the soil and water recommendations, or?
It was.
It was, okay.
And the reason for that is the buffer needs to be restored in the seaward 50-foot. That is one of the requirements of the agricultural plan, that there's a functioning 50-foot buffer in place.
This question is probably going to be for the applicant, but I'm going to throw it at you now.
Okay.
All right. So we got 97-acre property. Approximately 50 acres are not in the RPA, and they can't find They can't find place for the drain field in 50 acres.
I'm going to defer that to the applicant.
Okay. And okay. And I may need some explanation of the soil types. I don't know which of those soil types you can have a drain field in and which you can't. Obviously, the wetland ones you can't have a drain field in, but I wasn't sure about the others. So we may want to come back to that.
Okay.
As part of the answer to my question.
Can I ask you, sir, what's growing in the 50-foot area now that you propose to be restored?
Right now, it is what I would call a fallow field. It was recently bush hogged within the last 18 months. It did have some successional scrub, woody material coming up in it, and it had been bush hogged. So I would consider it a fallow field at this point in time.
Consider it allowing it to revert back naturally to natural forest type instead of planting, from a standpoint of, you know, the cost and benefits. It would be hard in my mind to see how we could plant anything that would serve better than a natural regrown site. Just a question, that's all.
I had thought of that. My reason for the plantings was to help jumpstart that process. If it is the board's understanding that that process would be best left to nature and just let it go, fence it off and let it go fallow, that certainly would be feasible as well.
This drain field, this is a pretty big drain field. What is this drain field for?
It is for the facilities in the tack room and the riding arena. But I would defer that question also, Mr. Gussman, to the applicant.
Okay, I mean, just like approximately, you know, how many toilets and sinks are we talking about here?
Yeah, I'm not familiar enough with that. I do know that it has been sized and approved by the health department. The drain field size.
But the drain field is strictly for human waste. There's no
Correct.
no animal waste going into the.
That is correct.
Okay. Hey, any other questions for the staff? All right, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to come forward, state your name, and you heard some of the questions.
Well, my name is Wayne Savage. I'm with Bay Design Group. I'm the engineer on the project. I've actually, if you guys don't mind, I've actually got a little pamphlet of stuff to hand out, and maybe this will help.
Sure, sure. And anything you give us, you know, becomes part of the public record.
Yeah, this is already actually in the package.
Okay.
That was submitted.
All
It doesn't
right.
seem like you guys were actually a party to some of the stuff that was put in the package.
Thank you.
I've kind of densed, I've kind of taken a little bit of stuff out of the package because some of the stuff was just a bunch of just random stuff that had nothing to do with the actual gist of everything. So what I kind of want to do, I guess first I'll kind of try to answer your guys' questions so everyone kind of understands you know, what we're doing here. So the first off, also I'd like to let you know the owner is here. Diane is here as well, so I may have her kind of speak to some of the stuff as well, especially as it relates to the building. I'm the civil engineer, so I'm on the site. I'm not doing anything on the inside of the building. But what they're proposing is they're proposing a horse barn. It's going to have, I believe, 15 stalls, which is going to be on basically the left side of the screen as you're looking at it. And on the right side is essentially the indoor arena. And then there's a small area that will have an office. They will have one toilet, one sink, and there will be 2 wash stalls that will be within the stalls for the horses. As far as that relates to, you asked about animal waste. None of the actual animal waste is going into the drain field. They will be washing the horses, and there will be a hair trap that will be located at the outfall pipe from that wash stall before it gets to the drain field. That way the drain field does not get clogged of the hair from the horses. As you can imagine, their hair is very thick and would clog a drain field quickly. Sure.
Wait a minute. So where they wash the horses is going into the drain field?
Correct.
Okay.
Which is permitted by the health department. Everything is permitted by the health department. They've already approved this plan. And
Okay, but I mean, you know, I assume if you're washing a horse, you know, you may still get manure there, right? When that's still.
if they excuse me, but if they poop, I guess while they're being washed, I guess that is possible. I think the intent though is that if you're washing them and they happen to use the restroom, that the owner would be probably cleaning that up with a shovel as they do anyway with stalls.
Okay, but none of the stalls would be going into the drain field?
No, the actual stalls do not, no. Just just where they're washing the horses so that the water has somewhere to go.
What about the water from where they wash the stalls? Where does that go?
I'm not sure they use water to wash the stalls, but I'm not a horse person, so I don't know the answer to that.
They have dry shavings in it, it's shovelless, it's not washed.
It's not, okay, it's not hosed down every day, okay. Thank you.
So as far as the size of the drain field, actually the size of the drain field, it's really not that big. It's about the same size as a normal residential drain field. Actually, as part of this application, what we have to do, because it's a commercial use, is we have to do what's called a wastewater characterization for this drain field, for this use. So actually what we do is we actually certify, and I actually certified it, it's certifying that this commercial use is a residential characteristic of wastewater flow. So it's essentially just like building a house and building a drain field building a septic field for a 2 or 3 bedroom house is pretty much what we're looking at here as far as a drain field. You mentioned soils and why can't it be located somewhere else on the property. This is the only place really on site where the soils are any good. As you saw from the map, the soils map that Mike had presented, most of the soils are terrible on this site. Either they're clay soils, which means they don't have any percolation, so you can't send any water to it because the water or the sewage.
Oh, okay, thanks for putting that up. So which are the soils that are good and which are the soils that...
Essentially, the orange are the only soils that are decent enough for drain field. The purple, the Pewick, and the Craven Uchi are not good for drain field capabilities. We had an on-site soil evaluator on site to do the drain field. He looked on site to find soils. He even looked at the soils that are up near where the horse barn is being proposed are actually what you call shrink swell soils. So they even have to have a larger footing just to build the building on because of these soils. And essentially they're just clay.
Okay, so the drain field has to go into the Emporia soils.
Correct.
It wouldn't be
Yes.
approvable by the health department in the Craven or the Pewick, right?
Correct. That's correct. Yes. And I will say the soils that are on James City County's map are from USDA soil mapping, and they're not perfect. So what you see up there is an estimated line of where those soils fall. That's what we hire an AOSE for, to go out there and find where these soils exist that there actually are good.
And his findings correspond to what we're looking at here.
Pretty much, yeah, essentially, yeah. I mean, he didn't go out and, he doesn't go out and do a new soil map for the whole site, but he did do borings on the site in the project location, and where he found the drainfield site is the best location. And as you saw from the sketch too, which is also, so you can maybe even see it a little better, if you flip this in my package, there's the third sheet in is 11 by 17 copy of the plan, and I've highlighted in green, which Mike has also done in yellow as well. I will like to note that the reserve drain field is not being constructed as part of this project. You don't put in a reserve drain field unless you need it, and that's once the primary drain field fails. The goal is that the primary drain field never fails and you never have a problem. I will say that this is a conventional system. It is not an alternative system, which is the most what's the word? It's a system that's not likely to fail as quickly as an alternative type system would. So with that being said, we're only really half of the drain field, the primary drain field will be installed at this time. The reserve drain field would only be installed in the event that the primary drain field failed, or a portion of the primary drain field failed. So we're not proposing any actual construction at this time in that area.
It looks to me like that's the only place you have to put it. Look at your soils map.
There is no other place. There's no place for the drain field to go. We can't. I'd love to say I'd love to not be here. I'm sure my clients would love to not be here as well, but unfortunately, that is the only location that had good enough soils that we could put a drain field in. We're even pumping to it. The two tanks that are shown up there near the parking lot, There's a septic tank and a pump tank. They have to put a $3,000 pump in just to get the sewage flow over to that location.
I know how it works. It's just, and it's desperation on your part going that far with it's called a grinder pump.
Yeah.
I know how the system's working. Looking at the soils map, that's the only place that you can put it where you've got it.
Correct. You are correct.
Chairman, question. Just to put a different slant on that question,
Sure.
your soil scientist has determined that this is the best place. Is this the only place suitable for installation of a septic tank outside of that would otherwise be outside the RPA?
In the project location, yes. Yes.
Okay, so he looked like he took soil samples up near where the storage tanks and, confirmed that the
Yes.
soils up there are
Yes.
no good. He didn't just look in the places
Correct.
where
Yeah.
you want to locate.
No, he actually had to do soil borings up near the building too to determine shrink swell capability of the soil. So he actually, for foundation design, he had to do soil borings up there as well. And with that, he's able to determine that those are not suitable for drain fields as well. So yes, he has determined that the location that we're proposing is the only location for soils, or for a drain field.
A question about, potential intermittent loads on the septic system itself. Wondering about the activities of your facility there. I'd assume you'd be having maybe classes, riding classes, or equestrian events or something like that?
That's correct.
Where you could potentially have, 20 or 30 or 50 people there at a time, or?
This is basically a private facility.
Excuse me. Is it Mrs.
Hasbrook.
Hasbrook?
Yes.
Why don't you come on up and state your name so, it's officially on the record, your answers and your statements.
Yeah, my name is Diane Hasbrook. I'm the property owner. This is a private facility. Most of the horses in the stalls are our own, and we have a few friends that are boarding there also. My daughter trains horses. She does private lessons. There will be no shows. This is a small facility. No crowds, no public admittance into this. So there's no more than 5 people on site usually at any one time. So no heavy use.
And if I may add to that too, part of the wastewater characterization letter that we had to write for this drain field as well speaks to that as well. We have to certify that the amount of people that they're going to have there on a daily basis, or even at a peak flow time, will not overload this drain field. So that is, you can rest assured that that's not an issue as far as this project is concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions about the actual drain field? Because I would like to speak to some of the mitigation that's being proposed, and also speak a little bit to the Soil and Water Conservation District plan that they are proposing as well.
I think you answered my question.
I have one remaining question. Given that the location is such an integral part of, the septic is such an integral part of the encroachment, did you happen to submit the soil report to the county for their records?
It goes to the health department. I'm not sure if they have a copy of the soil boring logs or not. I'm not positive. I can certainly give them those if they want them.
Just trying to help make sure that we establish purpose and need here.
Yeah, sure, understood. Yeah, I can certainly provide them to them. I can shoot them an email tomorrow as soon as I get back to the office and send it to them. That's not a problem at all.
Okay.
On top of the drain field, what's going to be growing there?
Just grass. And really part of the drain field, where the drain field is going, is actually part of the Soil and Water Conservation District plan for best management practices, which is, and actually if you flip to the last sheet, I believe, in my package, I've actually highlighted what their best management practice is going to be in that location specifically. And it's going to be, which I think Mike spoke to a little bit, is composting manure. And they're also going to have an all-weather indoor sacrifice area. Don't ask me exactly what that is. I'm not an expert on this stuff. That is something that the Soil and Water Conservation District required. So really, they're going to be basically putting composting manure over the 50-foot area it'll be the whole landward 50-foot RPA area They'll be putting composting manure, and they'll be growing grass there, and probably hay, and it'll probably be a bush hog type situation. It's not going to be a manicured lawn. It'll be something that will grow tall grass, and if they have enough area, they will use it for hay and putting hay bales together for feeding the horses.
Okay, were you going to go into details on the plan?
Yeah, so basically, I think as Mike kind of spoke to a little bit, the Soil and Water Conservation District did put a plan together to do an agricultural BMP for the entire 97.5 acre parcel. Once again, that whole plan, it's 122 pages, was a part of the application for this as well, so that you guys could kind of hopefully read that, which I guess you guys never saw it. I don't know if you did or not. But essentially what they're doing is on most of the areas, they are going up to the 50-foot line. There is actually a short area, which Mike kind of said he'd never seen before, where they are going up to the 25-foot mark. It's not in this location necessarily, it's further back into the property, but they are doing that. So what they're going to be doing essentially is, as he said, most of it is the composting manure. They're going to be basically taking compost and spreading it out on the ground, essentially amending the soil, making it even better than it is now, allowing grass to grow a lot easier. And then they also speak to the seaward 50-foot, and they say that it should be naturally revegetated. So they're not proposing to do mitigation. I think mitigation in that area, which I think, Mr. Apperson, I think you spoke to, I believe, that it naturally vegetating that area would certainly be a lot more feasible, and I think it would work a whole lot better as far as the RPA is concerned. The RPA is going to function a whole lot better with natural vegetation, not plants that you come in there and plant, especially the amount of planting units they were talking about. They were talking about 48 planting units is 48 canopy trees, 96 understory trees, and 144 shrubs. So the cost for something like that is astronomical for what you're talking about, where it's going to have to be naturally revegetated anyway per the Soil and Water Conservation District plan. Which I think if we are not required to mitigate, I think the surety would also be null and void as well, because the surety was strictly for mitigation. There will already be a surety in place for the installation of the drain field. That'll be part of the site plan process. They'll have an E&S bond, or it's a siltation bond that they'll have to do, and for the installation of the erosion and sediment controls on this site.
Other questions for the applicant? Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Would anyone else like to come forward and speak on this issue? Come on up, state your name for the record.
Hi, gentlemen. I'm Scott Stewart. I'm here representing the Stewart Family Trust. Our land is actually just below that area, so we share a property border with the applicant. As Mr. Savage said, this land was logged, I think, in 2013, 2014, somewhere around in that area. And I'm going to plead a little bit of ignorance about the RPA regulations, but that logging job took, the RPA took a beating, in that logging job. I've looked at the GIS files. I've got a small GIS background, so I can register the RPA files that are available in like the parcel map, and the trees that are there don't match up to the RPA boundaries that are that are available to me anyway. That as part of that logging job, a lot of that stuff was cleared off. And just so the board is aware, the actual property boundary between the Hasbrooks and the Stewart Family Trust is actually the stream which drains directly into the Doskin Creek right there. So that is the actual property boundary right there. So I just wanted to, as a as a property owner there, I just wanted to, voice a little bit of concern about what has happened to the RPA over the past few years. This is that entire piece of property was completely wooded up until that logging job, and my dad actually farmed the 2 fields, which are a little bit over there, but that was the only piece of denuded property that was there at all. So I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that the RPA, at least from our perspective, has already lost a lot of these trees, and we just have a little bit of concern there.
I'm going to make sure I understand your concern there. So are you saying that the recent logging has gone into the RPA?
Yeah, this logging occurred before the Hasbrooks took. Took over
before they acquired it, but at some time in the recent past. How many years ago were we talking about?
It was between February of 2013 and October of 2014, I think, based on Google Map pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so the logging occurred and the logging went into the RPA.
At least from what I can tell. I mean,
Okay.
again, my references are looking, registering those RPA GIS files that are available to me over that satellite map. Now, I'll be honest with you, like my understanding of 50-foot RPAs and 25-foot RPAs and what was granted to the logging operation, I have no idea. But just looking at it from that perspective, it just took a beating from our perspective. So, we can, that border with the Hasbrooks, we can see we can see the buildings through that, through there, and we have allegedly 50 foot on our side and 50 foot on their side, and we can sort of see through there now. So, as far as like, the use here, I don't really have a strong, comment or feeling about this. But just in terms of what has led up to this, and this being an additional, an additional potential impact to the RPA, I just wanted to, have the board consider that.
Okay, thank you for your comments. We'll take them into consideration. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? Sure, come on back up. Yep, come on back up.
Just to address a little bit of what Mr. Stewart was saying is that, yes, I think some logging was done further than it should have gone before we bought the property, and it is our intention for all of that to go back to natural, and it's growing fast back there, that this is the only area where it's not going back to natural, where we have the soil and water conservation agreement in that 50-foot boundary there to just increase our hay and pasture area. But anything that was disturbed other than that will all be natural within time. Yeah, it's the pine trees are growing fast. And just also as in your consideration for this, I mean, this property is a childhood dream for our family. It's meant to be a family farm. This is not a big commercial property because of the size, and it fell into commercial. But this is meant to be for our family and our friends. The scope of this has grown huge. We are already having to plant 31 trees and 154 shrubs by the landscaping mandates, and we've got nutrition credits, and there's been a lot imposed upon this. We want to keep this property. We want it to be natural. That's why we bought it. We don't want it developed. We want it forest, and it mostly is forest. We've got about 50 acres of forest on the property, and that's what we want. So we're trying to do everything we can to protect the property and the RPA, and just hope you'll help us keep this dream going without getting too many more requirements on us.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else like to speak on this issue? At this time, I'll close the public hearing and open up to discussion from the board. And I'll start off with my comments, since I'm chairman. Boy, this is a real change. We're not talking about anything in Ford's Colony or Governor's Land. This is really different from this. This is new territory for us, this case. I have a lot of respect for the soil and water conservation districts and boards, and I know they do a very good job. They take their role very seriously, and I think it would be a mistake to second guess what they've approved. They have the expertise. I think they know what they're doing, and I'm not sure we need to be redundant and revisit what they've already approved. So I sort of feel like I put my trust in them. If they approve the plan, although when I hear spreading manure within the RPA, if somebody in Governor's Land started talking about that would raise a lot of red flags. In a case like this, it doesn't. I certainly want to see I'd like to see open space maintained and family farms maintained in the county, and this seems like a very appropriate use. If they did what they said they did, and and this is the only place the drain field can be located, I'm willing to consider that and grant the exception in this case. So those are my thoughts.
I also feel the way that you do about the Soil and Water Conservation District. I've worked with these folks for a long time, and I have respect for them. I also respect the state boards that picked out the land for the drain field. If they picked it out, it will work. I've just got finished with a private project of my own where it's very similar to this, and I have a great deal of respect for the health department in this. I also would certainly encourage and want to see open space and farmland preserved and used in James City County. I would like to say, too, that the success of this working, in my opinion, and keeping the water as clean as possible depends on the owners. Someone that cares about moving the compost properly, spraying it properly, obeying the buffers, following the Soil and Water District plan, will produce nothing but pure, clean water in Dodson Creek. If you don't follow the plan as if the Soil and Water Conservation Service is laid out for you, it will be a losing situation for the creek, for the homeowners, and for the citizens of the county. I'd like to support this application, but the application, in my opinion, is only as good as the people that manage it. And it's going to be a home place. That makes a difference to me when you say it's going to be a home and something that your family wants to maintain. That's different to me than, say, a commercial interest, a commercial operation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments?
Go ahead.
Just to kind of get back to our point of tying in the soil and water recommendation, I think something in our resolution referencing that and referencing adhesion to that plan by the applicant would be a good idea. As a novice here, I've got no idea of how to frame that, but
It sounds like a good idea to me. What do the other board members think about that?
As long as we have the legal standing to do that, and I would lean to staff for that.
Yeah, yes, you're permitted to impose reasonable conditions, and I believe that's certainly a reasonable condition.
Now, how exactly would we do that? What are we talking about? The Soil and Water Conservation Plan? Is that the document?
Yes, there's a plan that Jim Wallace has put together at Soil and Water District. I will craft a condition that specifically references that. I will copy the board and Mr. Savage on that condition tomorrow. Make sure we're in agreement on that, and then we can get, if it's the board's will, we'll get the resolution signed.
I have the plan right here. I was just gonna say, we have the plan right here. The Hasbroucks brought it. It's actually the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation District. It's conservation plan for Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act compliance. And they reference the tax parcel PIN number. Do you guys want that? Just for a recordation of, I know you guys need to have it on the minutes and everything, so. They reference tax parcel PIN number 09201000001.
Could you just bring it up?
Sure,
so
yeah.
I can, okay. So let me make sure I'm procedurally correct here. So we can make an motion to grant the exception with the additional requirement that this plan be included as a condition. And then it's approved, doesn't have to come back to the board. You would just rewrite the approval memo, which I can sign tomorrow. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chairman, could also bring up the fact again about the natural revegetation. I would like to suggest that the board consider that in the plan. I know these soils, and I know the site of what's going on there, and just to go in there and try to plant trees, it's much better, in my opinion, sir, to let the natural regeneration take place there.
It's my understanding that the plan called for the natural reforestation.
I think Soil and Water recommended that, but I'm talking about the requirements, the planting requirements from our plan. Soil and Water recommended that, and that's the way I would, excuse me.
Mr. Apperson, I believe you want staff to strike conditions 2 and 3 from the resolution.
I'm not sure what the conditions they are, sir, but I would just like to have the
Condition
natural
2
regeneration, yes.
Condition
Can
2
you
is
put it
to-
up on the screen?
Certainly.
Apperson, are you saying you don't want the 48 mitigation planning units, and you just want natural vegetation? Or?
The natural, it's already there, in my opinion, sir. If you just not bush hog it for one growing season, you'll have sweet gums, you'll have trees there over 8-10 foot tall already. It's been that long. And the bush hogging and just staying off the land is the best thing to do for mechanically. Just let the natural regeneration take place.
Any objections to that?
Mr. Wilson, what is your standard for planting unit survivability?
In a case such as this, we would recommend smaller size material, which in staff's opinion does have a greater survivability, but we've not taken any statistics on survivability.
You don't have a 1-year requirement of stems per acre?
No, but we would have, I understand where your question now. We would have a 90% survivability after 1 year, which is what the $5,000 surety would guarantee.
What I was getting at was if the area was allowed to regenerate naturally, we could reasonably expect a certain number of stems per acre after a year or two.
We could.
We don't have a.
We don't have that standard, not like the Corps of Engineers for their mitigation.
This is really different than approving something for governor's land where we want to see a couple, a certain number of bushes. If Mr. Apperson feels that the natural regeneration and the old field succession that's going to take place there is adequate. I'm not going to question his judgment on that.
So you have
He's the expert.
Hundreds of stems per acre, sir, which is what you'll have there. And if you feel uncomfortable with it, you can certainly hand plant pine seedlings, but don't put any heavy equipment on this land. You'll develop ruts that'll be there for 100 years, and all they'll do is just contain stagnant water and happen to these sites before, especially the Craven soil.
Okay, well, I'm,
As the owner of a few wooded acres in this general area, I have to attest to the fact that you can't keep it back. So,
No meadows in eastern Virginia. Naturally occurring meadows.
okay. All right, are we ready for recommendation or motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the Chesapeake Bay Board resolution to grant the exception for Chesapeake Bay Board case CBPA 19-0010 with a revision to exclude the second and third conditions and staff recommendation and include a requirement that the Colonial Soil and Water Conservation Plan become an enforceable component of our permit.
Hey, that sounds good. I think that incorporated all our concerns. Everyone's clear on the motion? Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Lukens?
yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. You have your permit or your exception. Good luck with your project, and don't forget this. Good luck with it. Sounds like a great endeavor.
Thank you all.
Best thing could happen to that clay land up there. The grass is growing.
Grass is growing.
Yep. I don't doubt it.
Okay, we have another case in front of us tonight, CBPA 19-0015, 2054 Jamestown Road, Marina Redevelopment.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-19-0015. Mr. Anthony Lobier of VHB has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of James City County for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the renovation of the Jamestown Marina on property located at 2054 Jamestown Road within the Powhatan Creek watershed. This parcel was platted prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance in 1990, and the total lot size of the property is 37.08 acres, of which 53% is located within the RPA. This renovation is associated with the Living Shoreline project and is intended to improve water quality runoff from the existing property. A total of 102,863 square feet of impervious cover currently exists within the RPA under current site conditions. After the renovation of this property, 48,759 square feet of impervious cover within the landward 50-foot RPA and 47,205 square feet of impervious area within the seaward 50-foot RPA are anticipated. This will equate to 95,964 square feet of total impacts within the resource protection area. Therefore, there is a proposed net decrease in impervious area within the RPA associated with the renovation of this property. The existing marina has seen a lack of maintenance and deferred and general uptake over the years. As part of the project, several bioretention basins, pervious parking areas, riparian buffer enhancement plantings, and again a living shoreline are proposed. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the renovation of the Jamestown Marina and finds that the application meets the conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14, and that the application should be heard by the board because there are several accessory structures proposed and the reconfiguration of the existing space. Chesapeake Bay Board should fully consider Chesapeake Bay exception CBPA-19-0015, as outlined and presented above, and review the request for exception along with the WQIA. The board may grant the exception with such conditions and safeguards as deemed necessary to further the purpose and intent of the county's Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Staff does recommend approval for this exception request with the following conditions incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. All development activities located in the special flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 of the Floodplain Area Regulations of the James City County Zoning Ordinance and receive all required approvals and permits prior to the commencement of such activities. And this exception request approval become null and void if construction is not begun by March 13th, 2021, with written requests for an extension to the exception be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than January 31st, 6 weeks prior to the expiration date in 2021. I'll now have prepared a small presentation. Again, presenting CBPA-19-0015, otherwise known as the Jamestown Marina at 2054 Jamestown Road. The applicant has requested to renovate the marina and incorporates a living shoreline here at 2054 Jamestown Road. The aerial photograph shows the existing site conditions. We have a business taking place here in the northern portion of the map with boat sills encompassing the first edge of water, more boat slips here, parking areas for boaters here, and mostly parking for the business located here. Topography for the site indicates a gradual increase in topography around the ownership of the business and otherwise fairly flat in the rest of the property. Resource protection area as it impacts this development. Most of the development occurring during this project will be seen in this vicinity and in this vicinity, and the floodplain generally following the resource protection area under this circumstance. This is the depiction of the master site plan. Generally speaking, the overall image of what the contractors and the county plan to accommodate for the site. Living shoreline occurring behind the proposed slips, where current slips are, they will be moved outwards. They're going to replace these boat slips and add in one extra and continue the living shoreline. With decreased impervious areas here. The existing site plan, as it pertains to impervious area, the yellow indicates the seaward 50 impervious cover, and the orange area indicating the landward 50 impervious cover at the current site conditions, with wetlands being found on site in this vicinity and in this vicinity. This is the proposed site plan, again showing a living shoreline accommodating here and also extending up into this footing here as well. Some site photographs indicating a need for reconstructions. As you can see, the bulkhead and current walkway has been degrading as time goes on. This is the west portion of the lot, and this showing further the current boat slips, approximate area of the living shoreline that is proposed. This picture shows the opposite direction, again, living shoreline in this area as well, and the current parking spaces and impervious areas that are found on the site at the moment. Coming from this area where the wetlands are, looking out again towards the living shoreline. These boat slips will be pulled out towards seaward some. Again, another living shoreline on this side, and these boat slips that are currently there. Again, staff does recommend approval of this exception request, given that all other necessary local, state, and federal permits are required as deemed necessary, that all development within the special flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 of the floodplain area regulations, that this exception request approval become null and void if construction is not begun by March 13th, 2021. Excuse me, that should say 2021 on the screen. With written requests for an extension submitted no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration date, January 31st, 2021. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have, and I thank you for your time.
Let's start off. I see it has to comply with Article 6, Division 3 floodplain area regulations. Do you have any idea what that means, just in a very general sense? And before you answer that, I'm also sort of curious, from everyone who's involved in this, what's the worst flooding what's the high water mark for flooding there? And in the planning process for this was a lot of thought given to to future flooding. Just a general answer to that.
Sure. So I am not an expert on the floodplain regulations. That is mostly accommodated by our zoning department, and we do have a zoning administrator who does floodplain. I believe the project manager can speak mostly to that, but I believe the anticipated intent, especially for the living shorelines, is to protect against flooding. I'm not sure where the normal high water mark will be, so I will defer that question to the applicant.
Any other questions for the staff? Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to come forward? Welcome back to the Chesapeake Bay Board.
Good to be here. Yeah, I'm Daryl Cook. I'm with the Stormwater Resource Protection Division, and I'm the project manager for this project. Regarding the floodplain regulations and how it would impact this, it's just a tidal coastal setting here for flooding, and generally the requirements that would be affecting this project would be to make sure that any structures that are built are elevated 2 feet above the flood elevation for this area. So in this area, the flood elevation is like elevation 7. So any buildings or structures or anything would have to be elevated 2 feet above that. Since it's a coastal area, we don't really, any sort of fill would not really present a problem. If it was in a riverine situation, such as like along Powhatan Creek, there would have to be an analysis to make sure that any sort of fill, which would decrease the capacity of the floodplain, would not adversely affect anyone else or raise the elevation of flooding. So this would be the main thing here would be any structures would have to be elevated 2 feet above the flood elevation to protect them from impact.
I have a question. You've got the diagram up on the screen behind me.
Right.
There's a blue outline that goes around the entire project going out to Powhatan Creek. What does that designate?
Those are the anticipated contours. The part of the project will be to dredge the marina. It is currently very shallow for the use that's proposed, and so that's generally showing the shape of what the contours would be after dredging occurs.
That's not being considered today. Nothing about dredging is being considered today. Has the county considered or taken into account why the creek is filling in? Is that going to be, because the county owns all the property all the way up to landfall, to all the marsh, isn't that correct? All that is one piece of property?
Yes, yes, the property further, a little further up the creek on that same side of the creek is owned by the county.
That's not to be considered tonight, but if you would let whoever knows, I'm concerned about the condition of the marsh and how it's rapidly going away, and I think most of that is from boat traffic. And the county's in charge of the property, and they're also in charge of the speed of the boats on the creek. So that's something that should be addressed in future, for future comment. So, but this looks like a great plan. I haven't got any problem with this plan.
Okay. Any other questions? And we do have VHB consultants who have developed the plan here as well to answer any other detailed questions that you.
Okay, Mr. Cook, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? At this time, I'll close the public hearing. Any discussion from the board? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
Yes, sir. I'll make a motion to grant the exception for Chesapeake Bay Board case CBPA 190015.
Okay. Any questions? Everybody clear on that? Can we have a roll call?
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Lukens?
Yes.
Mr. Gusman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you for coming out this evening. That concludes our public hearings. We do have a matter for board considerations.
Mr. Chair, if it please the board, there are three projects up for extension requests. I would like to present all three of them and have the board act on all three at the same time, unless a board member wants to pull one specifically. The first one would be CBE 17-009, 3 West Circle. Raphael and Florina Tusa requesting a one-year extension, originally granted January 11, 2017, and extended on December 13, 2017, due to the fine tuning and value engineering of the construction of the home. Mr. Tusa did request this extension in time to meet the approved conditions. However, there was not a board meeting at that meeting, and staff administratively extended his approval until the next available public meeting. Staff does concur with his request with the stipulation all permit conditions, except for the expiration date, be reauthorized. And the new date of expiration be March 13, 2020. The second extension request is for CBE 17-048, 7515 Oak Cove Road. Ms. Jennifer Privet is requesting a one-year extension to CBE 17-048, originally granted March 8th, 2017, and extended on March 14, 2019. She's been unable to proceed on the room addition at the speed she originally intended due to factors outside of her control. Staff concurs with this request with the stipulation that all permit conditions except for the expiration date be reauthorized and that the new date of expiration be March 13, 2020. And the third one, CBE 18-058, 4447 Pleasant View Drive. Ms. Rennie Andrews is requesting a one-year extension to CBE 18-058, originally granted March 14, 2018. She's been unable to proceed on her project and complete the required mitigation due to issues with the Homeowners Association. Staff concurs with this request with the stipulation that all permit conditions except for the expiration date be reauthorized and that the new date of expiration be March 13, 2020. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding any of these three.
Any questions? Would somebody like to make a motion?
Move to approve granting the extension request for all three.
Okay, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Lukens?
Yes.
Mr. Gusman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Okay, that concludes our board considerations. We have no matters of special privilege tonight. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so moved. We are adjourned.